The man was clearly an instructor at the academy. Yet he was mocked by his students in class as nothing more than an inferior species. They even launched an attack on him directly. But no one expected that with just a slight raise of his hand, he would leave everyone stunned on the spot. Because the man could use every type of spiritual technique. It turned out that 100 million years ago, due to continuous environmental pollution on Earth, mutated monsters were born, known as the corrupted. They possessed astonishing regenerative abilities, and even nuclear bombs could not completely destroy them. So repeated human experiments were carried out, and finally, a way to fight back was found. But it was already too late. There were almost no survivors left in the world. However, we also discovered that the nanomachines we created could not only destroy the corrupted's regenerative abilities, but also repair the environment. They directly triggered the rebirth of this planet. So one day in the future, this planet would eventually regain its former beauty. Civilization would surely flourish once again, just as humanity once had. After that, I fell into a long hibernation, placing my hopes in the future. 100 million years later, as a little girl opened the laboratory door, the cryogenic sleep program of the hibernation capsule automatically began to deactivate. 3 children with animal-like features were chased by a monster and hid inside the laboratory. The monster pursued them closely from behind, and just as it was about to catch up, a beam of light shot out from the hibernation capsule, heading straight for the monster. The monster's skull was instantly pierced through. I slowly walked out of the hibernation capsule. Afterward, I found the storage box developed by the doctor. The clothes inside were still there, completely undamaged. I looked at the data on the big screen. This was actually the world 100 million years later. I thought to myself that most of the data had been damaged, yet this place had somehow survived. It was simply unbelievable. When I noticed the nano-injector, I understood. It was probably because of the nanomachines scattered in the air. Holding the information cube the doctor had left for me, I fell into deep thought. After glancing at the 3 little brats beside me, I finally realized I had not put on any clothes yet. Then, following the 3 children, I opened the laboratory door, and a ray of sunlight shone on my body. I looked at the mountains and rivers around me. So this was the world 100 million years later. The little girl tugged at my sleeve, called me guardian god, and told me to follow her. Looking at the ears of the little girl running ahead, they looked like animal ears. The 2 children in front, one had ears like a koala, and the other had ears like a cat. I thought to myself that they were probably not humans, but another kind of creature that had evolved over 100 million years. However, their language was the same. It was very likely influenced by the nanomachines. Then I asked the little girl tugging at my sleeve what her name was, and she said her name was Phil. The other 2 children were Donbua, the one with koala ears, and Cindy, the one with cat ears. I told them my name was Kim Doo-jin, but before I could finish, the little girl immediately pulled me forward. On the way, she asked if I could defeat the corroders, but I had no idea what she meant. Before long, we arrived in front of a village, but at this moment, the village was already engulfed in raging flames. I watched as the children ran and crying to look for their families. Looking at the wooden barricades and wooden buildings around me, I thought to myself that civilization in this era did not seem very advanced. Then I saw a monster wreaking havoc in the open space in the middle of the village. Phil anxiously shouted, "Grandma!" When her grandmother turned and saw her granddaughter, she questioned her, "Why did you come back?" I looked at the ugly monster. Could this be the corroder Phil had mentioned? But it looked exactly the same as the corrupted. It must simply be called something different in this era. Seeing the old woman in danger, I suddenly leapt up and kicked the corroder away. But just as I rescued the old woman and retreated, Phil immediately stepped forward, and a dazzling light instantly radiated from her hand. A ball of flame suddenly burst from Phil's palm and burned straight toward the monster. The monster was instantly struck so hard that it lost its balance and collapsed straight down. I stared at the monster's wound. Just as expected, the corroder's cells were not regenerating. That kind of wound should have been suppressed by nanomachines, but how did that little girl's attack produce the same effect? Only compatible humans should be able to control the nanomachines. Afterward, I asked the grandmother, "Could everyone in this era create that fireball just now?" She told me that only 4 people in this village possessed divine power. I instantly understood. So this was their ability to control the nanomachines in the air. Phil asked her grandmother, "Where is everyone else?" But her grandmother said, "I evacuated them because this village can no longer be saved. Because the corroder from earlier was merely a newly born larva. The main body is an existence we simply cannot handle." But at that moment, a young man walked over and said, "A corrupted like that, I will kill it with my own hands." At this moment, Phil interrupted from the side. I went to that sealed door. Then she pointed at me and said, "He is the guardian god behind the door." The grandmother looked at me in surprise, because I did not look like a god at all. But the young man from earlier chuckled and said, "Don't be ridiculous. How could that inferior species possibly be a guardian god?" I immediately furrowed my brows and looked at him. Then the young man continued, "He is just an inferior species without animal power. And inferior species are not welcome here." After saying that, the young man picked up his spear and walked away, while the uncle behind him hurriedly shouted, "Saris, where are you going?" Saris looked back disdainfully and said, "I'm going to kill that corroder." After that, the grandmother asked me to take the children to the shelter. Under their shocked gazes, I followed Saris toward the main body of the corrupted. Soon, we arrived at a river, where a huge monster was standing on the surface of the water. Seeing this, Saris directly raised his spear, with lightning flashing around him. As he charged forward, he shouted, "I am the man who will become a holy knight. An invader like you, I will crush you with my own hands." But before Saris could reach the main body, many larvae around him lunged at him. Saris's spear was accompanied by lightning. With one strike, he cut 2 lunging larvae in half at the waist. Then he unleashed his strongest move, his spear cleaving straight toward the monster's face with lightning. A deep bloody gash was cut into the monster's head. But Saris's expression changed, because its wound was slowly healing. The monster suddenly swung a claw toward Saris. At this moment, Saris had no time to dodge and closed his eyes as if accepting his fate. At this critical moment, I kept one hand in my pocket and used the other to block the monster's claw. Saris was instantly stunned on the spot. At that moment, 2 corroder larvae suddenly sprang out from the side and lunged at Saris. I slowly pulled the hand in my pocket out. Then I snapped my fingers. The 2 larvae were immediately struck by beams of light and were blasted into the sky in an instant. Their bodies then fell in front of Saris, and he looked at me in disbelief. At this moment, the children, the grandmother, and the others also arrived there. They looked at me in disbelief as I held back the monster's massive body with one hand. At that moment, I felt the force pressing against my palm gradually becoming heavier. I immediately retreated with Saris. After we withdrew to a safe distance, Saris asked me who I really was. I told him that even if he wounded this kind of monster, they could heal immediately. So he needed nanomachines to suppress their regenerative abilities, which was what they called divine power. That attack just now was indeed good, but the wound was not deep enough. Saris looked at me in disbelief and asked, "Are you really the guardian god?" With a gloomy expression, I walked toward the monster. There was something I had always wanted to say. Actually, monsters are my problem. Because these things are monsters born from our foolishness. After saying that, I stepped across the surface of the water and charged toward the monster. I slowly clenched my hand. Faint lightning burst from my palm. Immediately afterward, my entire body was covered in thunder. I stretched out my palm toward the monster, and light surged wildly from it. I remembered humanity's tragic end 100 million years ago. Suddenly, the light in my hand flared brilliantly, turning into a strong beam that shot fiercely toward the monster. The monster instantly let out a heart-rending roar. This attack seemed as if it had pierced through the earth. When the light faded, only a few pieces of the monster's severed remains floated on the water. At the same time, in the grass across the river, a girl had been ordered to investigate the invader who had appeared nearby. The girl held binoculars and watched everything we did. She instantly found it unbelievable, because even the commander of the Holy Knights in the royal capital could not perform that attack. An excited expression appeared on the girl's face, and she realized she had to immediately return to the royal capital to report. At night, I walked to a secluded place, took out the information cube, and opened the video the doctor had left for me. The doctor said directly to me, "Even if the world's environment improves, the corrupted may not go extinct." I first felt something was wrong 1,000 years after you fell asleep. At first, I also entered the cryogenic chamber regularly in order to observe the changes in the world. As the environment improved, the number of corrupted was steadily decreasing. But the improvement of the environment also promoted their evolution. I don't know what they will eventually become, but they will certainly remain a threat. So all I could do was fine-tune these newborn life forms so that they would be able to fight back against the corrupted. And I also left you some power. I could not help but look at the nano-injector in my hand. As long as you inject it, the nano-robots will teach you how to use it. Your body has been modified, so this is a power only you can use. Because you and the nano-robots are 100% compatible. I hid the energy-enhancing items in research laboratories all over the world. I did not put them together because I was afraid the corrupted would wipe them all out at once. and I also hope you can see this world on our behalf. In the distant future, although I do not know what kind of threat the corrupted will become, compared with the world of the past, it should be much better. Enjoy this new world properly. Although you may be the only human left in the future, please persevere until the end. I entrust the future world to you. After watching it, I remained silent for a while and softly said, I understand. At that moment, 2 children ran toward me, saying they had been looking for me for a long time. As they spoke, they tried to pull me back to celebrate. At that moment, I caught sight of an access key to the laboratory hanging around Phil's neck. I asked Phil where she had gotten that pendant. Phil said, a long time ago, a great person entrusted it to my family. It is an amulet passed down through generations. They said that when the village was in danger, as long as we had this, the guardian god would protect us. I instantly understood. So that was how they got in. It seemed I owed them a huge favor. At this moment, the villagers were dancing around the bonfire, celebrating the successful killing of the monster. Then the grandmother called out to me and said, on behalf of the village, I would like to express our gratitude to you. Phil's father respectfully said, thank you. If not for you, the village would probably be gone. We wish to repay this kindness. I smiled and said, if you insist on repaying me, I would like to learn more about the specific situation of this world. The grandmother said, in that case, you had better go to the royal capital. The country that rules us is Kalmozia. People from all over the nation gather there, so they should know everything. The villagers of Wood Spirit Village also often go there to sell specialty goods made from wood silkworm silk. At that moment, the grandmother stroked Phil's head and said, if you want to go to the royal capital, she can serve as your guide. Because this child can use divine power, and in the royal capital, there is an academy that can strengthen divine power. Early the next morning, looking at the vibrant scenery, I suddenly felt a little emotional. I really wish the doctor could have seen this too. When Phil saw that I had gotten up, she picked up some clothes and handed them to me. At the entrance of the village, Phil and I were planning to head for the royal capital today. The grandmother was still giving Phil instructions. Meanwhile, Saris beside them looked extremely indignant. Seeing this, I smiled and praised Saris. You performed well yesterday. I'll be waiting for you in the royal capital. Saris was instantly so moved that tears welled up in his eyes, and he shouted, I'll study hard. Amid everyone's reluctant farewells, Phil and I set off on our journey. We followed the river all the way toward the royal capital. At night, we lit a bonfire and rested in a sheltered place. I asked Phil how much longer it would take to reach the royal capital, and Phil said we still had to walk for 4 more days. At that moment, Phil curiously asked me, Guardian God, why do you want to learn about this world? I looked at her with a smile and said, that's a secret. But in my heart, I was thinking that I had to first investigate how the people of this era dealt with the corrupted. Because they were originally only able to reproduce in heavily polluted environments. Yet now they even existed in places with beautiful mountains and clear waters. Then I told Phil not to call me Guardian God anymore, and to just call me Jean. At that moment, the sound of horse hooves rapidly approached. Phil and I turned our heads in confusion. Several young and handsome men and women on horseback stopped in front of me. The man in the lead introduced himself. I am Argos, captain of the 7th Division of the Royal Holy Knights. I was instantly puzzled. So these were Holy Knights? At that moment, a red-haired girl could not hold back and angrily scolded, the captain is talking to you. Why are you still sitting? But the captain stopped her and asked me, would you be willing to talk? Seeing me stand up, Argos asked, where do you come from, and where are you headed? Phil answered, we come from Wood Spirit Village and are heading to the royal capital. At that moment, the red-haired girl dismounted and shouted angrily, so it really is them. Because Wood Spirit Village has no record of any inferior species being born there, you exposed your flaw. I was stunned, thinking that they must have something like birth records. This country was quite organized. But the captain looked at the little girl's clothes and shook his head. Because the clothes the little girl was wearing were made from Wood Spirit Village's specialty, Wood Spirit cloth, which traded at high prices even in the royal capital. Child-sized custom-made pieces rarely appeared on the market, so what the little girl said was very likely true. But you are different. After saying that, Argos drew his long sword and pointed it at me. Looking at my completely unfamiliar clothing, his doubts deepened. Argos held his sword toward me and said, recently, on the road to the royal capital, there have been frequent incidents of bandits using children to steal cargo. Phil was still holding a half-eaten piece of food and hurriedly stood up before she could continue eating, saying, it wasn't us. Seeing that the other side did not believe her, Phil hurriedly activated her divine power. But before Phil could move, countless light swords surrounded her. I glanced at Phil, who was sweating anxiously, while thinking to myself, so this is a holy night. Argos asked again, where are you from? Depending on your answer, I will decide whether to eliminate you on the spot. My gaze suddenly turned cold as I looked at him icily. The Holy Knight Captain Argos suspected that I was a robber, so he kept pointing his sword at me, asking where I really came from. I helplessly answered, I come from Wood Spirit Village. Hearing this, Argos asked Phil, and Phil hurriedly nodded. Seeing this, he mounted his horse, prepared to leave, and apologized to me. Then he turned back and asked if I was going to the royal capital. Seeing me nod, he said, we may very well meet again. If you run into trouble, you can come find me. Afterward, Argos pulled on the reins and turned to leave. I watched this interesting captain with a smile on my face. On the road, the red-haired woman was still saying that inferior species was very suspicious. Argos said, perhaps we are the inferior species. The red-haired woman was shocked, while the purple-haired woman agreed with the captain's words. The captain then said, actually, I attacked him 3 times. But each time, he resolved it so effortlessly. I did not even have time to try before I was directly suppressed. The purple-haired woman asked the captain whether he had used divine power to test him. But the captain said, it did not even activate. Hearing this, the red-haired woman was shocked. The spirits did not lend me their power at all. I was just as helpless as that little girl. This means there is a tremendous gap in power between us. And among all the holy knights, only the commander-in-chief may be capable of doing that. The red-haired woman said in frustration, how did I not notice? But Argos thought to himself that if he could become our ally, he might be able to solve the problem we are facing. When we continued our journey the next day, I asked Phil, can all knights in the royal capital use abilities at that level? Phil answered, that was only an exception. Only elites are chosen for the Holy Knight Order. As Phil gestured, she said, the speed at which he cast spiritual techniques was many times faster than mine. I immediately became curious. Then Phil explained to me that the ability to borrow the power of spirits was called divine power, while the techniques activated using that energy were called spiritual techniques. I instantly understood. So the nanorobots in the air were regarded as spirits. In this era, science had become fantasy. But thinking of that red-haired woman calling me an inferior species made me uncomfortable. I asked Phil, are there many species in this era? Some are indeed close to insects, and some resemble fish. Grandma said the places where we lived in the past were very limited. Everyone's bodies became suited to the regions they lived in. I was instantly astonished. Could they directly change in order to adapt to the environment? My thoughts raced. This meant that some survivors from 100 million years ago might not have gone extinct, or they might have evolved. Then I asked Phil, so those who did not change are called inferior species? Phil nodded. Because compared with those who adapted to the environment and changed, those who did not change are at a disadvantage in many ways. And many disadvantaged races are also sold as slaves. Hearing this, I was shocked. There are slaves too? At that moment, Phil innocently asked, actually, there isn't that much difference between everyone, right? It feels like everyone has gone crazy. Looking at Phil's adorable expression, I could not help but smile and say, you really are a good child. Just then, a girl collapsed in front of us. We hurriedly ran over. When I got closer, I noticed that the girl's ears were not animal ears. Looking at the injuries on the girl's body, I saw that they were far too severe. I gathered some nanomachines from the air in my palm and prepared to help heal the girl. But at that moment, the girl suddenly took out a dagger and pressed it against Phil's neck. Seeing this, my eyes narrowed. It seemed we had really run into robbers. My gaze turned toward the transparent figure directly ahead. So there really were people capable of reaching that level. Optical camouflage, a nanomachine function that captures the surrounding images and makes a person appear transparent. Seeing that the scene had been brought under control, the transparent figure in the air slowly revealed itself. After the bandit leader appeared, 2 more subordinates followed from behind. The 3 of them then surrounded me and asked which country I came from, telling me I had better not move. At that moment, seeing me being held at knife point, Phil slowly gathered divine power in her hand. I told Phil not to act recklessly. That kind of power should not be pointed at people. Seeing this, the bandit leader was instantly delighted. He had not expected this little brat to actually possess divine power. Another bandit asked whether I could use it too. I smiled faintly and said, I'll think about it. Seeing that I was still smiling, the bandit became very displeased and kicked me. But the bandit leader said, inferior species do not have divine power. Don't damage the merchandise. Then the bandit leader stretched his hand toward Phil and said, go to sleep. His palm suddenly erupted with lightning and pressed down on Phil's head. In a daze, Phil seemed to hear someone calling her. She suddenly opened her eyes. I asked, Phil, is your body all right? But more importantly, where is this? Looking at the people imprisoned around us, I said, the base of the people who attacked us. They must have gathered everyone they attacked here. Phil looked at my naked body and asked why I was naked and still so calm. I said indifferently, because my clothes are very rare, they stripped them off me. Phil curiously asked why I had not resisted. If I had resisted, they definitely would not have lasted more than 2 moves. I did not speak and instead looked at the people imprisoned around us. At that moment, the cell door opened and the little girl who had tricked us came in. The girl carried food and brought it to us. Phil angrily gripped the cell bars, but before she could curse a few words, the girl said, "You can hate me as much as you want." The girl put down the food and apologized to us, saying, "I had no choice." Sitting in the cell, I smiled and said, "You really are kind. If you were truly a villain, you would not say sorry." At that moment, I slowly stood up and did some warm-up movements. Then I gripped the iron bars of the cell with both hands. With a sudden exertion of strength, I tore the iron bars apart as if they were paper. I clapped the dust from my hands and said, "I was waiting for you to come. Where is the person most important to you being held?" Hearing this, the girl was shocked. "How did you know?" I only smiled and gathered power in my hand, pointing it at the girl. Specks of light entered the girl's body and healed her injuries. Because the injuries on your body are real. Even if you were acting with them, you could not have suffered such serious wounds. So they must have something on you, I said while watching the girl's injuries gradually recover. Then the girl told me, "My younger brother was captured by them. They killed my parents. He is the only family I have left." My eyes instantly turned cold. Not only trafficking people, but also murder, utterly unforgivable. At that moment, Phil asked if I had deliberately let myself be captured to save her. I nodded. A wicked smile appeared at the corner of my mouth, because I also had to wipe them all out at once. If you let even one of these people escape, the others will cause trouble somewhere else again. I walked to the door and kicked it, sending both the door and the bandit behind it flying. Looking at the bandit on the ground, I softly said, "When dealing with people like this, you have to uproot them completely." I carried the man I had kicked until he was like a dead dog. At the end of the corridor, I looked at the bandit still sternly shouting at me. I continued walking as if no one else was there, with small fry lying all over the floor behind me. When I reached a nearby spot, I stopped and threw the bandit I was carrying toward them. One bandit instantly caught him. Taking advantage of another bandit still being stunned, I rushed forward and punched him straight in the face. The bandit was instantly smashed hard into the door behind him. I turned toward the other bandit and clenched my fist. That bandit was instantly so frightened that he collapsed to the ground. While I was dealing with these small fry, the 2 girls had already rescued everyone. Phil was about to lead everyone out, but the girl asked, "Can we really escape?" Because the leader of these bandits possesses extremely powerful divine power. While the girl was worrying, I had already fought my way to the bandit leader's location. The bandit leader looked at my ferocious appearance and was so frightened that he shrank into the corner. He hurriedly asked whether I wanted money or slaves, saying either was fine. Then he pointed toward the child locked in a cage in the corner. I looked at him expressionlessly. I asked whether he was finished, casually throwing the small fry I had dealt with to the ground. At this moment, the leader became extremely anxious. He could not understand why, when facing this man, his spiritual techniques could not activate. Watching the man draw closer and closer, he could not understand what kind of power this was. Knowing he had no other choice, he hurriedly got up and ran toward a wall switch behind him. Then he suddenly pulled the switch down. As the wall slowly rose, a smile finally appeared on the leader's face. Inside the secret room, a corrupted was shockingly imprisoned. As the gates slowly opened, the corrupted roared and rushed straight toward me. Seeing that the outcome was settled, the leader smiled and said, "You're dead." The corrupted rushed in front of me, raised its claw, and smashed it down at me. I instantly crossed both arms and blocked its incoming fist. The bandit leader was instantly confused. How could an ordinary person block an attack from a corrupted? While defending, I said teasingly, "I was born with what you call a superhuman body, and my muscle density is several times that of an ordinary person." Then I punched the corrupted and sent it flying. Immediately afterward, light radiated from my hand, and when facing a corrupted, I was never stingy about using divine power. In the next moment, a cyan light instantly covered the corrupted. In just a short while, a pile of minced flesh appeared before the bandit leader. The bandit leader was instantly terrified. He also could not understand why an inferior species could use divine power. I looked at the bandit leader teasingly. "Do you have any more trump cards?" The leader tremblingly said, "Is there any chance you'll let me leave?" I directly punched him in the face. After finishing all this, I put on my trench coat and walked toward the table without looking back. I said sorry to the children in the cages. "Please wait a moment. I'll rescue you soon." The children instantly cried tears of joy. Then I began searching through the documents on the table, looking for evidence of their crimes. I also opened the drawer, and there were a few more documents inside. Looking at these characters that seemed like heavenly script, I discovered a cruel fact. I could not read a single word. I crouched down and looked at the minced flesh of the corrupted, thinking about why they had captured it. Specks of light glowed in my palm. "Let me take a look." Then several screens appeared around me. I looked at the nanomachine cameras in the air. They should have stored a week's worth of footage. At that moment, my eyes suddenly opened wide. I found it. The bandit leader was standing respectfully behind a nobleman. The nobleman told the bandit leader, "Something interesting is about to happen in this country." I stared coldly at the man on the screen. Meanwhile, in the nearest town, the rescued people were gathering together under the guidance of staff members. At that moment, the little boy I had rescued sought his older sister and happily ran over, shouting, "Sister!" The siblings embraced each other emotionally. After calming down a little, the siblings hurried to me and thanked me. Looking at the personnel arresting the bandits, I asked Phil whether these people came from this lord's territory. Phil told me, "They are guild staff. The goat-headed one is the guild master of this town." Seeing me, the old man hurried over and expressed his gratitude. He introduced himself as Padrak, the guild master here. Looking at the man before him, who seemed to be merely an inferior species, his intuition told him this man was not ordinary. The guild master told me, "This time, we received a large number of damage reports, and requests to suppress the bandits have never stopped." I was immediately puzzled. So the one who ordered their arrest was not the Lord? The guild master answered seriously, "The Lord has no authority. Handling crimes is the duty of guild employees loyal to the king. Even if Lord Shapewind, who governs this land, commits a crime, we are obligated to report it to the king." At that moment, I understood. It was like the Lord was the mayor, while the guild was the police. However, this Lord Shapewind was definitely not a good person. Then I took out some documents and asked whether they would be useful. The guild master was instantly shocked. This was a list of people who had traded with those bandits. I asked the guild master what would happen to the freed slaves. "Those with relatives will be safely sent back by the guild, but for those without relatives, there is nothing we can do." Looking at the two children beside me, I asked, "Is there no shelter?" The guild master helplessly shook his head. "Not a single one, but I can help them find work. But they are inferior species, so finding work will be difficult." I sighed softly. Inferior species again. Looking at the two children beside me, I wondered what should be done with them. Suddenly, inspiration struck, and I thought of someone. I asked, "If there is a place where the two of you could be useful, would you be willing to go?" The two children hurriedly agreed. I remembered that the Holy Knight captain had said that if I had trouble, I could go find him. I chuckled and said, "That is an excellent workplace." At this moment, in the royal capital, at the Argos estate in Kulmosia, Argos, the captain of the Holy Knights, suddenly felt a chill, as if someone had set their sights on him. This estate was his home. He then told the squad members behind him to go back and rest. As soon as he entered, 2 rows of servants stood in the hall, respectfully welcoming Sir Argos home. He handed his bag to the butler and asked whether everything had been normal recently. The butler leaned close to his ear and said, "A corrupted has appeared in the city." But unnoticed, a girl appeared on the second floor, looking down gloomily. Argos sighed. The situation was even worse than imagined. Logically, the corrupted should not have been able to get in, unless someone had deliberately brought it in. If that was truly the case, the most suspicious place would be Hannisk Academy. No matter what, we urgently need allies now. 3 days after the bandit attack, our group finally reached the capital. As soon as we entered the city gate, we were greeted by the lively atmosphere of the entire city. Phil explained that the capital basically depended on imports for its goods. Goods from all over the world were transported here, and people from Wood Spirit Village often came to sell their specialties too. I glanced at the insect person walking past me. Then I saw fish people conducting trades. All kinds of cultures and races gathered here. One could indeed see the unique development of this place. The streets were also clean and orderly, and public security seemed good. But problems still existed. No matter the era, beggars always existed. Then I remembered Phil had come here to attend school, so I asked her about it. Phil told me school started next week, and enrollment would take place right after the exam ended. After that, we found a place to stay. Looking at the two little ones, I thought about how to arrange things for them. Without a doubt, finding that captain would be the fastest way. Then I suddenly thought that I should first study the corrupted of this era, because someone was trying to use them for improper schemes. I could not let this era repeat the mistakes of mine. Then I thought that I might find something in the library. But when I arrived at the library front desk, the young lady told me I could not enter. She told me books were national property, so people could not enter and leave as they pleased. Only students or academy faculty members were allowed inside. I instantly felt helpless. After she said that, I suddenly realized that even if I went in, it would be useless because I could not read the words. Although Phil had been teaching me to read along the way, I still could not recognize all of them. Immediately afterward, I realized someone was following me, so I walked to a slightly more remote place. The two people were still discussing something, then they walked toward me. One of them directly punched at me. I reached out and grabbed his fist, making him unable to move. I had thought this city's security was pretty good, but he smiled recklessly and said, "You misunderstand." At that moment, golden light emerged from his palm. He had clearly used divine power. I directly flung his fist away, and the sacred power shot straight into the sky. It flew into the sky and caused a huge explosion, instantly shocking the nearby residents. I asked them what they wanted. Our client said, "You are in the way. As long as you disappear from the capital, you won't have to face danger like today from now on." I see. I instantly figured it out. I directly leapt forward and threw one of them to the ground with a shoulder throw. The other person directly used divine power, and a ball of flame came toward me. I merely turned around and stretched out my hand to block it. When the smoke cleared, my hand reached straight for his neck. But just as I was about to deal with him, a voice from the side told me not to move. The red-haired woman I had met before scratched her hair and said, "You actually dare to fight in the center of the city? I'll lock every one of you in a cell later." Then she saw me. She was instantly shocked. "You're that inferior species from before." She raised her spear and pointed it at me. "You've got some nerve. You just arrived in the capital and already started causing trouble." But at that moment, a girl in a dress said, "Those people were suddenly attacked. It should be self-defense." The red-haired woman instantly froze. Then she had people take them away. I smiled and said, "So Holy Knights also patrol? I thought that was the guild's job. We are only helping maintain public order." In truth, she had merely been wandering around and happened to pass by. Then she waved at us and was about to leave. I directly called out to her, wanting her to take me somewhere. At the Argos estate, I looked at the Holy Knight captain in front of me and told him about encountering bandits on the road. The two children beside me were the ones I had rescued. Looking at the uneasy girl beside me, I said that I wanted to help them find a place to work, so I had come to him. After thinking for a moment, the captain said they could stay and work directly at this estate. But there was one condition: I needed to serve as an instructor. A moment later, the siblings came out wearing servants' clothes. The captain instructed the servants, "Teach them properly. Do not discriminate against them just because they are inferior species." Then I waved goodbye to them and left that place. From now on, they would have to live their own lives. Walking behind Argos with both hands in my pockets, I said, "You want me to be an instructor. You definitely have another motive." He did not deny it. "Although I do not know your true identity, I believe you are a decent person, so I want to ask you for help. The king is seriously ill and does not have much time left. Right now, several factions are fighting for control of this country. But the problem now is that someone with absolutely no right to inherit the throne is also trying to seize this country. They are even using the corrupted and dragging innocent people into it." After hearing this, I instantly understood. So that lord was the only one who needed to be guarded against. Those people are operating from the shadows. We need to expose their hideout as soon as possible. So the most suspicious place is Hannisk Academy, right? Correct. She will help you operate inside the academy. As he spoke, he opened the door in front of us. "Let me introduce her. This is my younger sister, Miria, who studies at the academy." Before he could introduce me, Miria interrupted, "Brother, you are not planning to let this inferior creature handle the infiltration operation, are you?" Argos directly reprimanded his sister. Then he apologized to me, while I smiled faintly and did not mind much. The red-haired woman leaned close to my ear and said, "She is extremely talented, but her prejudice against inferior species is very serious." I replied, "You are not much better." Miria asked her brother, "Since the arranged identity is that of a teacher, can an inferior species like him even serve in that role?" At this moment, Phil suddenly added, "He can't read." I was instantly speechless. I asked Argos what subject I was supposed to teach as a teacher. Argos said. From what I have observed, your skill in spiritual techniques is quite profound. Fire, lightning, ice, healing, if you can master any two of them, you are more than qualified to be an instructor. I asked with some curiosity, is that all? Argos was instantly shocked. Could it be that you can use special spiritual techniques that only a very small number of people can use? I remembered the bandit leader from before, so in this era, he actually counted as a talented person. A smile appeared on my face. It seemed I was about to shake up the common sense of this era. 1 week after my secret discussion with Argos, the day of the academy's opening finally arrived. Phil went to take the entrance exam. At this moment, Argos was bringing me to the principal's office. Led by a teacher, we arrived at the principal's office. Argos then called out, "Principal, long time no see." The principal looked at Argos with relief, because he was also the pride of this academy. Then the principal asked, "I heard you got involved in the country's factional disputes." As he spoke, he glanced at me. "Are you sure he can do it? He is more capable than anyone in the 7th squad." But at that moment, the teacher beside him issued a firm protest because no inferior species had ever entered this place. At this moment, I stepped forward and introduced myself. I would like to know whether inferior species are unsuitable for teaching because they are inferior species or because they lack ability. The principal smiled faintly and said, "Naturally, the latter. If one has ability, nothing else matters." At this moment, Argos interrupted from the side, "Then let's test him." We all arrived at the Academy's spiritual technique training ground. The principal introduced the rules. The rules are simple. You will fight one of our instructors. This is the fastest way to prove your ability. At this moment, students who had heard the commotion were also rushing over. They all wanted to see just how strong an inferior species was. Because the common sense of this era was that inferior species had weak bodies, and even if they possessed sacred power, it was extremely minimal. After the battle began, the instructor opposite me immediately activated his divine power, and a fireball flew toward me. I hurriedly dodged the attack to the side. Then the opponent began condensing golden lightning again. I could only dodge to the side once more. I sighed. Originally, I did not like using this power against people, because this power was created to fight the corrupted, but I had no choice. Immediately, cyan light gathered in my hand, and the black dot at the center of the light slowly expanded. It directly covered the teacher opposite me, and the teacher looked at the scene in surprise. Before he could understand what kind of spiritual technique it was, he was forcefully pressed flat onto the ground. All the people in the stands were instantly shocked. They had never seen this kind of spiritual technique before. I smiled and said, "It seems this academy still has many things to learn, and not only the students." Seeing that the result had been decided, I cancelled the gravity. Unexpectedly, the teacher opposite me immediately sprang up. He shouted and asked whether I had used some despicable trick because he had never heard of such a spiritual technique. At the opening ceremony 1 week later, the principal was giving a speech on stage. But many students noticed that in the teacher area, an inferior species was actually sitting there. They immediately found it strange. All the students were intentionally or unintentionally looking in this direction. I had to think of a way to change their view of inferior species. Time passed quickly, and in the blink of an eye, it was time for my first class. After the teacher beside me finished the introduction, I went up to the podium. First, I introduced myself, telling them that from now on, I would serve as their spiritual technique teacher. At that moment, a red-haired male student directly asked, "Are you sure you are qualified?" I smiled and said, "If you think attending this class is a waste of time, you don't have to come. But I want to tell you that the reason spiritual techniques were originally created was because they could suppress the regenerative abilities of the corrupted. But this function has no effect on the human body, it only leaves wounds. So this power was created specifically to eliminate the corrupted." At that moment, one student laughed and said, "Power is power. I thought you could offer some kind of teaching, as expected of an inferior species." After hearing this, the other students also burst into laughter. I looked at that student and said, "If you think I am weak, you can try. If you can injure me even slightly, I guarantee I will never appear again." After hearing this, the student instantly became excited and directly condensed a golden spear in his hand. He attacked straight toward my face, but I did not move at all. At the moment of impact, a huge explosion occurred, and smoke instantly filled the area. Suddenly, a dagger shot out from within the smoke and flew toward that student. It brushed past his ear and nailed itself into the wall, while I stood unharmed in place. If I had intended to, you would have been finished just now. Because we are relatively weak, you call us inferior. But now that I am stronger than you, what should you call me? I will tell you the answer. You should call me teacher. Then I asked them, do you know the condition for activating spiritual techniques? The student from earlier answered, it is just imagination. You raise your divine power. You transmit the imagined power to the spirit body, and then it shapes it. Isn't that basic? I smiled and said, indeed, but that is not the key. Only when you completely accept it and let that wavelength flow through your entire body can you use spiritual techniques. Everyone was completely shocked because they did not understand what a wavelength was. Then I said, there are 8 basic wavelengths in total: fire, lightning, healing, and ice. You should at least know these 4. In addition, there is gravity control and light control. And there is also air pressure control, as well as the one I demonstrated before. Spatial barrier. These are the 8 basic wavelengths. The teacher beside me was stunned. I could actually use all 8 types of spiritual techniques. Then a lightning spear condensed in my hand. This is where the power of imagination lies. After class, Miria came to find me, saying that she had indeed underestimated me. Immediately afterward, she asked who I really was. I said I was just an old antique who had been sleeping in Wood Spirit Village for 100 million years, but she told me not to joke. Then she asked me, if you really are someone from 100 million years ago, what were you doing back then? My mind instantly fell into deep thought. Back then, I was an agent. I had eliminated countless scum at the time. It felt just like yesterday. I really missed those days. Then why did you sleep for 100 million years? I answered, because I failed. I thought I could solve everything alone, but in the end, I could not do anything. Then I asked Miria, where are we going? Miria said, I am fulfilling my duty as your guide. After that, she brought me to the storage room where teachers' class materials were kept. Miria said that according to the design plans, there should be a hidden room in this room. I turned my head and looked at the owl on the bookshelf, feeling that something was wrong. Then I reached out and touched it. After finding that it could be turned, I twisted it. The bookshelf in front of us slowly opened, revealing a staircase leading downward. Immediately afterward, a ball of light condensed in my palm, and I walked down with Miria. Then Miria asked me whether I had already identified a suspicious person. I said Teacher Rudman might be involved, because he was too calm. As for Teacher Gita, his emotions were too easy to read from his face. He seemed to have no hidden schemes. Immediately afterward, we reached the end of the stairs, and a huge space appeared before us. But after walking to the end of this space, I was instantly shocked. I never expected to see here one of the doors to the Kagura research laboratories scattered all over the world. At this moment, I could not help but step forward and touch the door. Miria was curious why there was such a door beneath the academy and asked whether I could enter. I told her that an access key was required. Without that key, no one else could open this door. I carefully thought in my mind that Phil had inherited the key in Wood Spirit Village, so someone here might also have inherited one. In that case, I could only open it myself. Then a faint blue light appeared in my palm. The moment my palm touched the door, a voice sounded, highest level access authorization confirmed. Unlocking. The next moment, the huge door opened. Miria looked at me in disbelief. I had just said it could not be opened. When I saw the scene inside clearly, I instantly realized that the person holding the key and the person bringing chaos to this country were the same. Miria also had not expected that so many corroders were hidden beneath the academy. I walked forward and carefully looked at them, discovering that they showed no sign of going berserk at all. I was immediately somewhat confused. Why were they so quiet even after being captured? The same was true for the other corroders. Thinking carefully, the corroder captured by the bandits also showed no sign of rage. And what confused me even more was how they had transported corroders of this size here. At this moment, Miria said, let's set an ambush here. The mastermind will definitely appear. I rejected her suggestion and told her we should lock down the academy now and eliminate these corroders. Because if so many corroders went berserk, basically none of the students above would be able to escape. And I had a bad feeling. Miria immediately felt that what I said made sense. Then I told Miria to notify Argos and have them lock down the academy directly. Immediately afterward, I walked deeper into the research lab alone to see if I could find any clues. Meanwhile, Teacher Gita of the academy was being discussed by the students because he had lost the match. He had always believed that I must have cheated because no one could use 8 spiritual techniques. Just as he stomped his feet in anger, the principal walked up behind him. Then he asked Teacher Gita whether he had seen Teacher Rudman. After thinking carefully, Teacher Gita said, it seems I have not seen him since the opening ceremony. The principal scratched his head helplessly, not knowing where he had gone. At that moment, the principal saw purple-black lightning flashing in the sky and immediately felt uneasy. Meanwhile, Miria had just run out from the basement. She was panting heavily because she needed to tell her brother about this as soon as possible. But at that moment, a voice entered her ears. "Miss Miria, where are you planning to go?" It was Teacher Rudman. At this moment, I had also arrived at the end of the research lab and discovered a huge device. I found the box he had left behind. When I opened it, I found that it indeed contained an information cube left by Kagura and a nanomachine injector. Then I picked up the information cube, hoping to learn what the huge device in front of me was. Immediately afterward, a video appeared before me. "It seems you have already arrived here. We developed an incredible device here. And part of the device's contents has already been sealed inside the nanomachines. I truly am a genius. Do you know what this device is? This is a teleportation device." Hearing this, my mind froze. I finally knew how that massive corroder had been transported in. At this moment, the clock outside the laboratory was slowly moving. Then Kagura showed me the result of their work, the teleportation device. But why was it different from the one in front of me? Then what was this? Before he could think further, the clock hands reached the hour, and the sound of the bell echoed through the laboratory. Immediately afterward, the device in front of me erupted with blinding red light. Then the red light covered all the corroders in the cages. The creatures that had just been locked inside the cages all vanished in an instant. Meanwhile, Argos looked at the scene in the sky, and cold sweat involuntarily ran down his face, because countless corroders were falling from above the city, accompanied by red light. On the other side, Rudman pointed toward the passage behind Miria and said, "He should still be inside right now. Actually, even if he comes up, there is nothing he can do, because I have already obtained invincible power." At that moment, Phil raised a jar and crept up behind Rudman. While Rudman bent down and reached into his arms for what he called his new power, she directly smashed the jar down on him. Miria, who witnessed the entire scene, showed a stiff smile on her face. Then Phil proudly declared that she had won. Immediately afterward, she introduced the person behind her as Kudo-chan. Outside had already fallen into complete chaos, and she said you all had come this way. At this moment, Kudo-chan was still fearfully clinging to Phil's arm. "Phil, isn't it bad for us to hit a teacher?" Phil said they could just blame the young lady in front of them, since no one had clearly seen their faces anyway. When I came up and saw the scene, I was instantly dumbfounded, not knowing what had happened. Phil hurried forward, grabbed my sleeve, and told me that the situation outside had already descended into chaos. I said I knew, because all the corroders in the laboratory had disappeared. When we came outside and looked toward the city, fires were spreading everywhere, corroders were everywhere. The people in the city were fleeing for their lives in panic. The largest corroder raised its head and roared toward the sky. We discovered that the direction it was heading was the royal castle. A golden beam was condensing in its mouth. If that attack were released, the entire royal castle would probably cease to exist. I was filled with regret. I should have destroyed that device from the very beginning. Immediately afterward, I took out the nano serum and injected it directly into my body. This serum was a simplified version of the teleportation device. Kagura told me it could only be used once a day, but that was enough. At the exact moment the energy beam from the corroder's mouth blasted toward the royal castle, my figure disappeared directly from the city wall. When I appeared again, I was already above the royal castle. I pushed forward with one hand, and a transparent spatial barrier forcefully blocked the incoming energy beam.